High in the mountains, tucked between pine trees and morning mist, sat a small and quiet temple. A young boy named Kobe lived there as an apprentice to the head priest. Kobe was not a very serious student. Instead of practicing his chants, he chased rabbits around the courtyard. Instead of meditating, he took long naps in the sun. And instead of studying, he played pranks on anyone who walked past. One autumn morning, Kobe looked out at the mountain across the valley and saw that the chestnut trees were full of fruit, round and golden, hanging in the branches like little treasures. "Master," he said, tugging at the old priest's sleeve, "I want to go pick chestnuts on that mountain over there. Can I go?" The old priest looked up slowly. "No," he said. "People say a mountain witch lives on that slope. She eats anyone who wanders in." "Oh, that can't be true," said Kobe, waving his hand. "Someone just made that up to scare people." The old priest studied the boy for a long moment. Then he sighed, reached into his robe, and pulled out 3 small paper charms, each one folded neatly and tied with a thin red thread. "Very well," he said. "Perhaps being frightened just once will do you some good. Take these charms. If you are in trouble, use them. But use them wisely. You only have 3. Kobe snatched the charms without much thought and ran off down the path, already thinking about chestnuts. The mountain was everything he had hoped. The trees were heavy with fruit, and Kobe filled his basket happily, moving from tree to tree, deeper and deeper into the forest. He was having such a good time that he did not notice the sky turning orange, then purple, then black. By the time he looked up, the forest was dark and full of strange sounds. Said Kobe, pulling his robe a little tighter. "It is rather dark. I hope there is no witch here after all." Just at that moment, a voice came softly from behind him. "Hello there, little one. All alone?" Kobe spun around, his heart hammering. But standing behind him was only a kind-looking old woman with a warm smile and gentle eyes. "I live just nearby," she said. "Come in and rest. I will cook those chestnuts for you." Kobe's fear melted away at the thought of a warm meal. He followed her to a small house in the trees and ate a full bowl of roasted chestnuts by the fire. They were delicious. His eyes grew heavy, and before long he was fast asleep. He woke in the dead of night. The fire had burned low. The old woman was gone. From the next room came a strange scraping sound, slow and rhythmic. Kobe crept to the door and pressed one eye to the gap. Inside, crouched over a long, curved knife, was the most frightening creature he had ever seen. Her face was twisted, her eyes were yellow, and her fingernails were long and black. She was sharpening the knife against a stone, and she was humming to herself. The mountain witch. Kobe stumbled backward with a gasp. The witch's yellow eyes snapped toward the door. "So you are awake," she said, her voice now low and raspy. "And you have seen me. That means I cannot let you leave." She rose slowly to her feet and moved toward him. Kobe's mind raced. "Wait," he said, holding up his hands. "Wait, I need to use the toilet first. Please, just a moment." The witch narrowed her eyes. "Fine," she growled, "but I will tie this rope around you and stand right outside the door. Do not try anything clever." She tied a rope around Kobe's waist and pushed him into the small outhouse at the back of the cottage. He shut the door and stood there breathing hard. "Think, Kobe, think," he whispered to himself. Then he remembered the charms. He pulled the first one from his pocket and pressed it gently against the wall. "Please," he whispered to it, "answer for me, just like I would answer." Then he opened the small window, squeezed through it, and ran. "Are you done yet?" called the witch from outside the door. "Just a little longer," answered the charm, in a voice that sounded just like Kobe. "You are very slow," snapped the witch. "Almost done," said the charm. Kobe was already sprinting through the dark forest toward the valley, his basket long forgotten. He had made it quite far when he heard a terrible screech from behind him. The witch had opened the door and found nothing but a paper charm on the wall. She was furious. He looked back. She was running, and she was fast. "Lucky charm," Kobe gasped, pulling out the second one. "Make a wide river appear behind me." The ground shook. With a great rushing roar, a wide river burst up from the earth between Kobe and the witch, its waters churning white and wild. The witch ran straight into it and was swept off her feet. Kobe exhaled and slowed to a jog. That ought to stop her. But it did not. The witch opened her mouth and swallowed the entire river in one long gulp. Then she climbed out of the empty riverbed, dripping, and kept running. Kobe's legs were burning. He was nearly the temple gates. He grabbed the last charm. "Last one," he panted. "Please, a sea of fire behind me." A wall of orange flame leapt up from the ground, roaring and crackling, stretching wide across the path. The witch ran straight into it and disappeared behind the flames. Kobe reached the temple gate and threw himself through it. "Master, Master, she's real! The witch is real, and she's right behind me!" The old priest appeared in the doorway, holding a rice cake on a stick over the fire, completely calm. "Ah," he said, "you met her." "I'm sorry, Master. I should have listened. Please, hide me." The priest nodded once. Kobe clambered into a large clay pot and pulled the lid over himself. A moment later, the temple door flew open with a crash. The witch stood in the doorway, her yellow eyes blazing, her hair wild and wet. The sea of fire had gone out. She had blown it out with all the river water she had swallowed. "You old man," she hissed, "where is the boy?" "What boy?" said the priest, calmly turning his rice cake over the fire. "I've been sitting here alone all evening." "Do not lie to me," she snarled. "Give him to me or I will eat you instead." The priest looked at her for a long moment. Then he said quite pleasantly, "Well, before all that, shall we have a little contest? I've always been curious about shape-shifting. They say mountain witches are the best in the world at it." The witch stood up a little straighter. "We are. Could you, for example, make yourself as tall as the ceiling?" The witch snorted and stretched herself up until her head brushed the wooden beams above. "Impressive," said the priest. "And as tall as the mountain outside?" The witch swelled and grew until she filled the doorway and rose above the roof and towered over the trees, enormous against the night sky. "Remarkable," said the priest. "But surely you cannot make yourself as small as a single grain of rice." The witch shrank back through the door with a smug expression. "Of course I can. Watch." She got smaller and smaller and smaller until she was no bigger than a speck on the tip of the priest's finger. "My goodness," said the priest, and then with one smooth motion, he pressed the tiny witch into the warm rice cake he had been toasting and ate it in a single bite. He brushed the crumbs from his robe and sat back down. A minute passed. Then the lid of the clay pot lifted slowly, and one eye appeared. "Is she gone?" said Kobe. "She is gone," said the priest. Kobe climbed out of the pot. He stood for a moment, looking at the floor, then looked up at the old priest. "I'm sorry, Master. You gave me 3 charms, and I used all 3 because I didn't listen to you." The old priest picked up his rice cake stick and poked at the fire. "And what did you learn?" Kobe thought about the dark forest and the rope and running as fast as he had ever run in his life. That being clever is useful, but being wise is better, and I was not very wise. The priest smiled just a little. "Come then, there is still time to study before bed." And from that night on, Kobe sat quietly in his lessons, practiced his chants without being asked, and never once chased a rabbit around the courtyard again. Well, almost never.